He's just an analyst. He can't go on a submarine. We are the Spy-Fi guys, and this is The Hunt for Red October.
So, welcome back to the Spy-Fi guys. We are your hosts. I'm Christian.
And I'm Zach. Welcome back.
So today we'll be covering The Hunt for Red October.
Yes, this is a classic story that is more spy-oriented than you might think. Tom Clancy, of course, is a prolific American writer, and this is his first story he's written. A lot of books, produced a lot of video games, made a lot of movies, but this is the one that started it all off. And for your listening pleasure, I read the book again before we watched the movie, and the book, if I could summarize it in one word, is long.
Even longer than the movie?
Well, see, you know what's interesting is that I actually found myself enjoying the book more than I did the movie.
Interesting. All right.
I may not have been in the right frame of mind to watch the movie, but I felt like the movie, most of it was pretty boring.
All right. Well, let's should we get into it?
Sure.
Here's the synopsis from IMDb. In November 1984, the Soviet Union's best submarine captain in their newest sub violates orders and heads for the U.S. Is he trying to defect or to start a war?
Dun dun dun.
Well, let's first start with that big text intro, which ends with the line, "Nothing according to the U.S. government, nothing what you are about to see ever happened."
Which is
and I find that really interesting, just because it's like, all right, there's nothing in here that it wasn't based on a true story or anything like that. So you would assume that this is not something that actually happened, unless and yet they're trying to make you think maybe it did happen.
Yeah, that's this thing older movies like to do, where even though something is obviously fictional, they try to pretend oh, maybe it could have happened. I don't know what's up with that. I didn't really like it. I like it when it's a little more straightforward, especially because this one doesn't have any sort of fantastical elements.
Well,
monsters or whatever.
Oh, okay.
Magic. That's what I mean by fantastical elements.
All right.
So I don't understand why they would try to imply that it's a true story, because if it was a true story, we would have heard something about it, or would we? I guess that's something to be revealed later.
All right.
Okay, so we got Ramius on his ship, and we don't know what his intentions are.
Mm-mm.
The audience doesn't, which is different. I'm going to be saying differences between the movie and the book this whole time. But in the book, they string you along a little bit, but within a few pages, he talks about his plot, how he's going to get his revenge on the USSR because they killed his wife and they killed his father, and all of this stuff that probably would have been a red flag on his security clearance to be a captain of a submarine, but whatever. Which is also why I think that the tagline or the synopsis that you read was interesting, because even the characters consider that in the book, the characters think that he might start a war for maybe 30 seconds.
Oh,
but we'll get to why when we get to there. Should we move on to Jack Ryan, played by Alec Baldwin?
Yeah. So he's the first of what? How many? So after him was Harrison Ford, Ben Affleck, Chris Pine, and now what's his face? Yes.
John Krasinski.
That's the one, yes. So that's 5?
Yeah. Almost as many as James Bond.
Yeah, wow. All right, so you see him, he's at home. So here's my question. First of all, they're in London. Why is he living in London?
Because that was his job. He was when it starts, he's a historian. I think that's true in the movie too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's there because of his wife's job.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I was it made no sense for me, and I've seen it before, but I completely forgot that they were in London. Because I've more recently seen Patriot Games where they're living in Annapolis, which makes more sense. Well, so I was when they say London, it's why London?
Well, exactly, and because if you're trying to make a movie out of a book, you're trying to cut unnecessary things. Why wouldn't you just cut that, or have it start with him on the airplane, which I think is how the book starts?
Yeah.
But what's funny is the scene where he's in London, we see Gates McFadden.
Yes, Dr. Crusher herself, who is never seen again.
Yep. I don't even remember who she was. Was she his wife or was
She's
she
his
like
wife. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That is
And
just
then you see their daughter as well. I don't remember what the daughter's name is.
Oh, I don't remember. Another difference is that remember how he's looking for a bear? It's like a subplot that he's looking for this bear the whole time, and then he gets it at the end. In the book, he's looking for skiing Barbie.
Huh.
And I guess the reason why they changed it is because they didn't want to pay the rights to use the Barbie name in the movie.
Probably not.
But speaking of unnecessary details, I don't think the movie really improved from having him do that.
So he gets on a plane. The attendant, is checking on him, and he's saying how he's not going to be able to sleep because of the turbulence.
Yeah, he says that he's afraid of flying.
Which, we later find out that he got crashed in a chopper accident. In his third year of the Marines. So I can understand why he might be a little afraid of flying.
Yeah, absolutely. So then I have written down as we get our first action scene. Always a good idea to start with action. And that's when Ramius, aka Sean Connery, kills the political officer on the Red October. So did the movie communicate well what a political officer does to you?
I had a good idea that it's basically just from reading a bunch of books and everything, that it's the person who's supposed to make sure he's like the representative of the party on board to make sure that everyone's being loyal to the party.
Yeah. And so he's really loyal to them, and obviously he wouldn't go for a defection. And then in the book, Ramius makes clear that he really dislikes him on like a personal level too. So you can sort of use your imagination about all of his negative qualities.
Hold up, we skipped over the meeting with James Greer.
Yeah, so the reason why I keep doing that is because things are in like a different order.
Oh, okay.
So in the book, Ramius kills the political officer before we meet Jack Ryan.
I see. Okay, all right.
Which one's James Greer?
James Earl Jones. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, which is kind of important because it details why Jack Ryan's looking into all of this.
Okay.
Because he goes and says, shows Admiral Greer this report that British intelligence have picked up about this new submarine, which has doors on it that might be a caterpillar drive.
That's true. That's correct. And they wouldn't be able to detect it, which is very concerning. Yeah.
So I've got here what he says about the Typhoon. It's a Typhoon class sub, 12 meters longer than a standard, 3 meters wider than. So it's a big damn ship.
And here is where we get my first issue with the book. In the first half of the book, anytime anything happens, it's like 5 pages of description. Okay. So here he comes in Admiral Greer's office. He's like, what's the situation? He's like, this is a Typhoon class submarine. And then it's 5 pages of description about what a Typhoon class submarine is. Which, unless you're really into that stuff, you're not going to find particularly interesting. And it moves the momentum of the story into like a grinding halt. I don't know. I was like caught up in the story, but all the description really slows it down. And I'm like, can we just get back to what's going on?
Yep. One other thing of note during this talk with Admiral Greer, Greer asks Jack, how's Caroline? And this is the only time that Jack Ryan's wife is referred to as Caroline. All other times it's Kathy. So
it's like a mistake?
It's a mistake. I think in the book it's also just Kathy. So I'm not sure, unless
it is Kathy.
So you don't really get Kathy from Caroline. So I don't know what was going on there.
So like either someone on the script messed up, like in Star Wars where they call him Han Solo and Han Solo like interchangeably, or like or it's like in character and the Admiral made the mistake, which somehow I doubt.
I can buy. Well, I could kind of buy that. All right. So
the thing is, these characters aren't exactly deep and complicated.
That's true.
At least everyone other than Ramius isn't.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's what they're going for. By the way, one other thing I forgot to mention is after the political officer dies, the doctor, who's played by Tim Curry, has like this weird scene with Ramius where he's like, "Oh, I have to report it." Blah 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 blah. I think in the book the doctor is in on the plot, so that's a change.
Interesting. Yeah. So, before he gets murdered, and let's try to stick to the movie plot, just so that
Okay, sorry.
Not confusing our listeners a little bit.
All right.
So we can order. So I really liked how, before this point when they're speaking, it's all in Russian, and then they zoom in on that word Armageddon, and then as he's reading, and then they start translating into English after that. And it's a good, because otherwise, I mean, you don't want to read subtitles the whole movie, but you also need to find a good way to make that transition. I thought that was a really cool way to do it.
Yeah, that's like the thing people talk about the most when it comes to this movie, and I think it's really smart, really interesting, and I would kind of wish more movies would do that. I had heard that they make that transition, and I thought they were going to do it sooner. Like they spoke Russian with subtitles much longer than I was expecting.
Also, the loyalty officer's name was Putin, which I found really funny. I mean, I don't know how common a name Putin is in Russia. It could be just like Smith or, John here, but I just thought that was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I should have written that down because that's a good point.
I also definitely thought he was gonna. I figured he was gonna kill the loyalty officer, but I thought he was gonna poison him.
Oh yeah, as opposed to the crazy martial arts stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But well, I mean, I guess the doctor would have discovered that he had poisoned him, and
true. Yeah.
In an autopsy, which of course he was going to do.
Yeah.
Opposed to a very convenient accident. Very convenient, but whatever.
Yeah, so he uses the loyalties officer's key to retrieve the orders, but then takes out the real orders and replaces them with his own set of orders that he's cooked up to aid his own plot. And then he burns the real orders, which seems like a terrible idea on a submarine. You have a limited amount of air, and you're going to eat up burning something.
Well, they smoke all the time, too.
I also noticed that, too. Like, should you really be smoking on a submarine? That seems like a bad idea.
Same era as when they smoked on airplanes. I guess with the canned air, then they could somehow figure out a way to do it, but it seems like a bad idea.
Yeah. All right. So next in the movie, we have Jack Ryan visiting his friend who works on subs and questioning him about could this be a caterpillar drive? But then we get our first sort of Chekhov's gun thing. We see the rescue sub, the tiny 2 or 3 man sub that he's working on. Wonder if that ever come back into the picture.
Yeah. That actually didn't occur to me because I was too busy trying to figure out where the guy who plays Skip Tyler, aka his friend, is from. He's the guy who plays Principal Rooney in Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Oh yeah, he is.
And then we also see Sam Neill from Jurassic Park. He's another Soviet officer. There's a lot of famous.
He's like the first mate, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I actually thought he got like a Hugo Weaving vibe off of him for a long time.
Huh.
He has that same kind of intense look.
Yeah. We go back to the sub, and Ramius gives them all their orders, and we get all the Russian singing.
Yes, and so in the book they explain that all of the officers were chosen by Ramius because they were loyal to him. So the officers were in on it, including the doctor, Tim Curry, but the sailors weren't. So they needed to lie to the sailors in order to get them to go along with it. So already the idea of like a sub defecting from a totalitarian state like the Soviet Union is already pretty far-fetched. And I guess that's the way they kind of try to explain it, but I still didn't find it particularly believable, but whatever. That's why this is the Phi and the Spy Phi on this one.
I mean, they even mentioned it in the movie that, they called him the Vilnius schoolmaster.
Oh yeah, there you go.
So he basically taught their entire sub fleet. So of course you'd be able to, pick and choose people who are loyal to him because most people would be loyal to him. And then we have Seaman Jones, who's the sonar operator.
Who's like God's gift to sonar, man.
Right. So he's, able to detect the tiniest little thing. And so he even, when they're nearby, apparently, and he detects singing somehow.
Yeah. Well, that would only make sense if the Red October had no idea that the Dallas was there. So it's like the Americans have some skills of their own. They're able to sneak up on Red October without being detected. And no idea. Also in the book, this gets paired with a 5-page description of how sonar works, if you're interested.
So So we head back to Jack Ryan and Admiral
Mhm.
Greer, and they're going into a briefing.
Right.
And we get a great line of, who's giving this briefing? You are.
And then at one point, one of the, I think is the Joint Chiefs of Staff, calls Ryan out. He's like, "You're just an analyst. What do you know?"
That is, so there's two things that happen in every Jack Ryan movie and TV show that I've seen, and I've seen actually all of them.
Okay.
There's always a scene where he's like, "I'm just an analyst. I don't go out in the field."
Which he definitely says here.
Mm-hmm. And there's also a scene where he's in some sort of meeting and he's just saying something to himself because he realizes what's going on, and then everyone turns to him and he doesn't realize he was talking that loud.
we definitely got that here too. Well, just
Yeah.
like you said. So another major departure from the book here is that, you know how in this meeting Ryan's like, well, maybe he's not a madman, maybe he's defecting.
Mm-hmm.
In the book, they know that he's defecting because of someone named Cardinal in all caps. So they explain that they've had a spy in the Kremlin for many years named Cardinal, and there's this whole long description of how Cardinal gets messages to them. But Cardinal's a high-ranking Soviet guy who figures out what Ramius says in the letter that was sent to the. So basically, Ramius sent a letter that says, "I'm going to defect. You guys suck. Eat it." So in the movie, we know that the letter exists, but we don't know what it says. That we can sort of put two and two together. And in the book, they make it clearer, which I like. First of all, because it's more spy stuff. Second of all, it just makes it a lot cleaner. There's less ambiguity in what's going on.
See, I think this is the difference between movies and movies and books.
Mm-hmm.
I think there needs to be sort of an element of mystery about it for a movie, just because it's that way, the actors can sort of play that sort of ambiguity. So I like better, I think. It might not work as well in a book where might get all their inner thoughts and everything. So that in that case, that might work better. But in a movie, I think it works better if you're not quite sure what he's going to do.
So I totally get that point of view. We are partial to his thoughts in the book, so it wouldn't have worked as well. But something I would have liked about the movie then is that they should have brought up some of that more subtle things. So for Ramius, I would have liked to see a little bit more. I don't know how they would have done it, but I'm not a filmmaker. Like, I would have liked to have seen a little more ambiguity about his intentions. Like, you don't really know what he's thinking, except that he's heading to America. And also, this is fast forwarding a little bit, but when Ryan tells like that pilot or something that if you don't get me on that submarine, there's definitely going to be a war, a nuclear war. Remember that part?
Yes.
I also didn't get the movie didn't communicate the feeling to me that they were like right on the knife's edge of going to war with the USSR. You know what I mean? Did you feel that way?
No, you're right. But maybe he was just over exaggerating to actually get it to happen.
Yeah, maybe. Also, they talk about, I guess this is skipping ahead too. Sorry about that. They talk about how all of the American ships and all of the Soviet ships are out and they're like going, and they're searching. In the movie, we never see them. I would have liked to have seen that. I would have liked to have felt more like there was this huge thing going on.
I mean,
and, all that stuff.
I think partially that is budget. Like they were, that's why you could show them on a map, but you can actually show them out there. Because I mean, you have to first of all either get all those ships or build models to do it and make the models look really good. And get U.S. Navy cooperation to do that, which I'm not sure how much cooperation from the Navy they had for this. But I can't imagine that the Navy would want to use whole fleet for filming.
So apparently there's some kind of rule that the US military will only allow film crews to use their material in movies that makes the US military look good. Or maybe that's a rumor. I don't know.
I think that's true. A rumor. I know that they will do like they want to see the script first before they allow anything.
Or maybe it's just that they won't do it for movies where like the US military is like the villain.
Well,
like
that makes sense.
Well, because certainly for the movie Hot Shots starring Charlie Sheen, the US military doesn't exactly come off looking great, but there's too much stuff in it for them to have made it on their own. All right, so moving on.
All right. Yeah. So where were we?
So he's in the meeting with the Joint Chiefs.
He gets assigned to do it, to go find Captain Ramius and see if he's actually defecting or what's going on.
Yep, and also so in this space, Jack Ryan is basically acting as a spy because he's going with these sailors, and they don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so his job is to like spy on them as well as do his own mission. Also, a minor departure from the books is, and I can totally see why they cut this out, is that before he makes it, he like spends most of his time on a British ship called the HMS Invincible.
Really?
Yeah, so it's like a British aircraft carrier that they've like borrowed for the purposes of finding Red October.
Interesting.
By the way, that leads me to something I wanted to tell you, that the British have like the best ship names.
Oh yes, definitely. Dauntless or whatever. Yes, they're all
Invincible, Indefatigable. I mean, I like the state names that the U.S. has too, or like carrier names like Enterprise, but the British are real solid.
Yeah. So speaking of the Enterprise, Jack goes to the USS Enterprise, 2 years before one Commander Chekhov steals some nuclear material from it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
If you like to imagine it's the same universe, I mean, it's possible.
Yeah, although now that I think about it, it is also the same carrier that one Pete Maverick Mitchell flies off of in the beginning of Top Gun.
Yep.
And which is also in 1986 actually. So wonder how it got so quickly from the middle of the Indian Ocean back to San Francisco.
Well, like they said, they got a job to do, so keep it going. So there's also, but actually, just before he gets to the Enterprise, I have a note that the Red October experiences mechanical problems.
Yes. So that's when they first have the sabotage. Wait, let me see.
Well, it's left a little ambiguous as to whether it is sabotage or not. Also, in this scene, Ramius tells one of his underlings to shut up, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Shut up.
not very professional, but okay.
Well, neither was he, because he kept questioning his captain's.
Yep.
Or he's a captain, right? Yeah, his captain's orders.
So also while Ryan's on the Enterprise, we get a film of an airplane crashing into the deck of the Enterprise. Which to me sort of should have been like a bigger deal. Yeah. If it's not a bigger deal, then why put it in?
I think it was supposed to be sort of emphasizing the danger that was going on. So the story behind that ship, the plane crashing, was that it was you have like Top Gun. If you have sort of a rescue operation, this is very similar to the end of Top Gun, now that I think about it, where you have, the end of Top Gun, the reason that they have those ships going out, the planes going out, is there's it was, in this case, it was in Top Gun's case, it was a U.S. Ship that went off course, had got damaged and went off course into non-friendly waters. And so you have the rescue operation mounting, but the other side is also coming in and sending their planes, and they get into a skirmish. So that's basically what happened off screen when one of these planes apparently got hit, and it was trying to land and didn't land.
Okay.
Or didn't make it. So that's what the deal with that was. And it was sort of just like an offhand mention. So you're right. So it should have given it a bit more mention, I think.
During this period when they're like searching for each other, there's another book thing. There's actually more action scenes in the book than there is in the movie, which I guess makes sense. The book's longer, but one of them is similar to this, where a Soviet plane is like scouting, and he's like looking for American ships, and a bunch of American planes like sneak up on him without even realizing that they're there, because America, we can do anything. So they're like, why don't you go on home? And somehow he like shoots missiles at them. Like, I don't remember whether this is the same scene or another one, but at some point an American plane gets like hit by a Soviet missile and almost crashes. And that's really intense, because it's like, oh my God, if they start shooting at each other, there's going to be war. And if there's war, then it's going to be nuclear annihilation and all that stuff. Yeah.
One of the lines I really liked in this scene where they're chasing each other, but also the Red October is going through that trench, and you have the one sailor who's really freaked out that they're going so fast in this trench, and you have the navigator who's like, give me a compass and a map, and I'll fly the Alps in a plane with no windows.
Yeah, that was awesome. Also, the part where he's like waiting to like turn at the last second.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the same? Where there's that the same one? Because there's two parts where they're like, where it's like the part where they're being chased by torpedoes. Is what I'm thinking
Yeah,
of.
so that's it happened shortly. That happened shortly after my part that I was
Oh,
talking
okay.
about. So it's when
Sorry.
they're in the trench already. Yeah. So no, it like
Mhm.
happens like right
Okay.
after in the their trench, and then the caterpillar drive
Mhm.
fails, and then so they have to go on right without silent running.
Okay.
Yeah, and then that's when people were able to pick them up on radar or on sonar, and that's how they that missile gets fired at them. But yeah, that was a really tense scene with the first mate, with his timer timing. Okay, this is how I don't how do they do that so that know how many seconds until the launch if they have like that's some really quick math in your head that you're
Mhm.
doing if you're like, okay, we've sped up this much and now it's this far off.
Well, I guess that's why they're the professionals.
Yeah.
Or I mean, maybe they had like some rickety 80s computer that could do it. So usually submarine stuff doesn't really do very much for me. I
Yeah.
have to say, like those those old the Wrath of Khan is different, but like in the
I was gonna
Star Trek
say, yeah.
series, when they
Hmm.
have the parts, or even sort of in the movie where they're like stalking each other and it's all like tense,
Uh-huh.
I just find it kind of boring.
Really? What? No, that's
Sorry.
like ratcheting up the tension is who's gonna find each other who first, who's gonna strike first. It's
Hmm.
I don't know. That works for me completely, I would say.
Maybe it's because Wrath of Khan I've already seen, and then in this case I read the book, so I like knew what was going to happen.
Okay, maybe.
Well, but like those scenes in the Dark Knight when it's like the bombs are going to go off and it's
Hmm.
really tense, that really did it for me. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But with the part where they're being chased by the torpedo, that was really good. Even though the old green screen technology, I'm not sure aged that well, like the special effects.
I mean, you got to think that this is what 1990,
It's
so
1990, yeah.
yeah.
So
So
basically, green
we
screen technology were like non-existent.
no, you're still what 9 years before the Matrix. So that's like an entire sort of generation of movie making every
Yep.
10 years. And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, for that era,
All right.
I think next work. Yeah, so we also have a meeting between the Soviet ambassador and a U.S. official where he has to just basically state that they lost the Red October,
Right.
and they now well at first they say we don't need your help to find it,
Mhm.
and then they have to reveal that he may be trying to launch a nuclear missile at you guys, so come help us find him.
That was crazy that he would admit that.
Well, I don't think it was that crazy because he basically he could play his cards however he wanted to, and he's making the U.S. do his own work for him by saying that he might launch a missile because they know very well. The Soviets know that he's trying to defect. That's why they're trying to catch him.
But they're it's risky if the Americans find him first. Actually, you're right.
No,
It is
because they're going to
smart
kill him.
because they would just sink him. Yeah,
Yeah, they wouldn't try to
that's
talk to
true.
him. That's why Jack Ryan is trying so hard to be the first one to find him.
So that actually is probably a good difference. That because when the Americans know, but they can't always tell all their sailors what's really going on. But when the Americans don't, when the Americans are actively trying to kill him, that makes the stakes kind of higher, and I do
Yeah.
kind of like that.
Mhm.
That's different. But the in real life, the Soviets would probably never admit. they'd rather end the world. Probably
Well, so
than
that's why
admit
only have the U.S. The Soviet ambassador saying it to a U.S. official, but not having it out through public media. You can have these things behind closed doors, and no one will find out about it.
theoretically.
Theoretically, yeah.
But they did have to explain something because when the Americans can tell when all of their ships are moving, and they're not just going to buy that it's like an exercise or something like that.
Or will they?
I don't know. I guess the Soviets gave the American president a little bit more credit than that. There's a lot more scenes of the ambassador talking to the president in the book, but none of them are really kind of stand out in my memory.
We get a scene with Ramius talking to his first mate about when they defect, where are they going to go live, and this is when I knew that first mate was going down because he started making plans for the future.
Oh,
Like,
really?
he's gone. He's gonna die.
Yeah, you might as well say it's like 2 days before retirement.
Yeah. But what's his name? Ramius also has ideas, but for some reason, I believe he's going to make it. Whereas I did not think that the first officer was going to make it. So, spoiler alert: when he does die, I was not that surprised. I was still sad, but I was not surprised. But the first officer is making his plans to go live in Montana, have an RV, and drive to Arizona every year or every winter. Whereas
That's a
Ramius,
little
I think, just
specific.
wants to live somewhere where he can fish.
Yeah.
The peace of fishing. The peace of fishing, he calls it.
Well, I guess it's important to establish your motives.
Yeah.
Even at this late, your character's motivations, even at this late hour.
Yeah. And so we get Jack Ryan realizing that this the USS Dallas, the submarine that's been chasing the Red October. No one else knows that they've been chasing the Red October because they can't really communicate with anyone else. So, but he realizes that they found him, and he gets on board a helicopter and does a crazy stunt to lower him from a helicopter into the submarine.
That part was literally the only part of this movie that I remembered before watching it. For some reason, I thought it was like at the beginning.
They use it also as that exact same setup and the exact same footage in the second episode of Jag.
Oh yeah, I remember you telling me that.
Yeah, so Jag basically had like access to the entire Paramount library of Navy movies or whatever. So like the first episode uses all sorts of footage from Top Gun, and then when I was watching the second episode, I was like, wait a minute, this looks exactly this is definitely the same footage.
Well, that's pretty smart.
It's a way to save on costs where you can have Hollywood level stunts but not have to pay for it.
Well, certainly it looked really good.
Oh yeah, no, I mean that stunt looked really good, but I also just enjoyed how the helicopter, once he drops in the water, was like, well, we're out of here, peace out.
Yeah, hopefully he didn't break his legs or anything on the way down. But yeah, so he gets on the Dallas, and then they're like, okay, we need to like communicate with the Red October through periscope Morse code. Right? And he like explains what their like plan is, how they're going to get everybody out.
He asks, or Jack Ryan asks Ramius to confirm with a single ping, and each time Sean Connery says, what does he say? Confirm our distance, one ping only.
Yeah, were you a fan of Sean Connery in this?
I liked him a lot in this. So growing up, I didn't see the Bond movies until like maybe I was 13. So in my mind, Sean Connery was always old man Sean Connery. So like seeing him like this in my mind's eye, his prime,
right,
I liked it a lot. And even though he didn't do a Russian accent, I thought it worked. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I almost shudder to imagine him trying to do other accents.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I thought he did a perfectly fine job and certainly helped sell the movie.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I almost would have liked to have seen more of him. I don't think he was in it as much, considering he was top billed.
So, funny story about this. So, when they sent him the script, and this is in 1990, so this is after the fall of the Berlin Wall. They have détente.
I thought the Berlin Wall fell in 1991.
I thought it was. Oh wait, no, sorry. As after Chernobyl, which is in '89, and then that's the start of détente. You're right, and then it fell in 90.
It says it fell in 1989.
I was okay. That's right. That's what I thought.
All right.
So it's after the fall of Berlin Wall. Détente is starting, and so Connery doesn't realize when this is set. It's like, I don't think this is going to work. We have détente. Why would this happen? And then apparently the first page, which explains it is set in 1984, did not get faxed to him. So once they faxed him that first page, he's like, oh, that makes much more sense. Yes, I'll do it.
Well, good on Sean Connery for keeping up with current events.
Right?
Just living in like that celebrity bubble.
Yeah.
But yes. Like, how can you forget the first page of a screenplay?
I don't. Well, maybe it's like, well, if you remember faxes, you always have a cover page. So maybe they forgot to do a cover page and faxed it, and then someone thought this first page was just a cover page and tossed it
Well,
out.
I think it's interesting that they do like a Cold War movie, like all the Cold War is like almost over.
That's true. Yeah. Well,
usually with these kinds of things, they give it a little bit of time to sort of let the memory kind of settle. So like they didn't start making Vietnam War movies until like, later in the 70s. It's not like the war was over and they immediately started making movies about it. Same with World War II, with a few exceptions.
Yeah. But yeah, so getting back to the story, they bring their this Red October south to an abyssal, which is a really deep trench, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And they fake a reactor leak.
Yes.
And they do some reverse psychology on the doctor to make him think that no, nothing's wrong. And say, no, Captain, you have to evacuate them. Oh, if you say so, of course we'll evacuate the men.
So this was the problem with this whole plan is, well, not the problem with the plan, but the things they have to figure out is how to get all of the loyal crew members off the ship off the Red October.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have to make them think that the Red October was destroyed, because otherwise the Soviets will want it back, which is something we haven't talked about yet.
Right.
Which I thought was hilarious when they bring that up.
So talking about the Doctor, I know we didn't really talk about him that much before. So I've seen this very recently, but when I saw it, like about a month ago, I vaguely remember that there was some traitor on board, and I kept thinking it was the Doctor. I kept thinking, oh, it's definitely the Doctor. But it was a nice red herring that it wasn't the Doctor. So, and I was like very pleasantly surprised. All right, you fooled me.
Maybe Tim Curry just has that kind of suspicious.
It's just a slimy. He just was very slimy and sort of weaselly, and I was like, he's got to be the traitor.
See, that's interesting because he didn't strike me as slimy.
Okay, maybe it's just
maybe it's because I already knew that he wasn't the traitor, but he just seemed like a guy who wasn't a conspirator, but he wasn't like a terrible person. He was just loyal to his country.
Yeah, but he kept popping up in places where where popping up where sabotage would happen and stuff like that. I was like, no, it's got to be him. It's obviously him. But I was wrong. So so they get all the crew into the rafts, and they tell the Doctor, we're going. There's they see an American frigate, and they said, all right, save the men. We're going to go down and scuttle the ship.
Yep. Oh, the officers are going to go down with the ship before they let it fall into the imperialist hands, which I loved.
And then the U.S. launches a torpedo from a was it a helicopter or a plane?
I think it was a helicopter, which
I didn't know this thing. Yeah,
I didn't know that either. But it was like, okay.
So, and then you get the torpedo approaching the ship, and then Admiral James Greer presses a button.
Yup.
That torpedo did not self-destruct. You heard it hit the hull, and I was never here.
So they had to make the deception both from their own people and from the Soviets.
Exactly. Okay. And then we get the Chekhov's gun, or Chekhov sub, shall we call it, of the rescue sub. Coming with Jack Ryan and the captain of the Dallas and the sonar guy coming on board the Red October. And you see them, the captain gives Jack Ryan a gun, and when they see all the guns, I like how they make a callback reference to, let's hope we don't get boarded by some buckaroo.
I don't remember that part, but that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's in the very beginning. It's like when they're talking about the defection and saying, let's hope that, the American we deal with is someone smart and not some sort of buckaroo.
Well, fortunately, they did get someone smart. So this is like a minor difference in the book. And the so in the book, the Red October stays down, and the sub does multiple trips up and down to get all the men out. Which works because there's Soviet guys patrolling the area.
Oh, okay. I think that was a way to condense things, definitely.
And also that's why Jack Ryan and like some other Americans get like stuck on the sub.
Okay.
Because on when the rescue sub is like comes back, that's when Skarsgård attacks.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So we haven't talked about Stellan Skarsgård, who's
Yeah,
one of the like closest. Was he like one of the one of the people that Ramius had trained, who
yeah, he was.
but wasn't necessarily going to be loyal to him. He's more loyal to the Soviet cause. So they send him to try to track him down and catch him, and you don't really see him appear until like this point, really. Like, well, I mean, you see him appear, but you don't see him finding the ship until this point, really.
He's sort of like Carrie Fisher in the Blues Brothers, where he's like he will show up every now and then just to remind you that he's still on Ramius's tail, and you know he's gonna have the showdown sooner or later.
Yeah. So his ship shows up, his sub shows up, and there's a battle. The rescue sub goes away before it can get hit. And at the same time, we find out that the saboteur is a cook who is
never
on
trust
board.
Cooks.
Right?
That's the big lesson from this: is that never trust cooks.
But
there's other cooks who are spies too.
So rather than the butler did it, it's the cook.
Yeah, basically.
But this brings me back to my original theory. So the doctor's the one who did the count, but he didn't count the cook. So maybe he was a spy.
Oh, that's true.
I'm kidding. Well, or it's just or he's just really not that good at counting men.
Yeah, I think in the book they explain it where they were just like, so they just wanted to get everybody out of there. There's so much other stuff going on that they like missed somebody. Which that's a very human failing. So another couple differences here is that in the book, first they deal with the spy and with the cook spy. They have the gunfight, and then Skarsgård shows up and they fight him.
Well, I think I like it better condensed, where they're both happening at once. Gives it a bit more drama.
It's great. Well, it's sort of like, so let's contrast the two movies. Okay, so we have Return of the Jedi, where there's multiple battles happening and you like go between them, versus Speed with Keanu Reeves, where they're in danger and then they get out of danger, and then they're in danger again and they're out of danger, and it's like progressively rising tension.
I was wondering where you were going to go with that.
Yes, thank you. So I also like the way they did it in the movie, where it's like multiple things happening at the same time. It's just a lot cleaner. It doesn't feel like, oh my God, it's going to be another ending. This movie's just going to keep going. But something that they didn't explain in the movie is that the Dallas can't shoot Skarsgård's sub. Because that would be starting a war.
I guess I didn't really ever think about it, but yeah, that makes sense. Because they would be firing on an active Russian submarine.
Right, but similarly, Skarsgård can't shoot at the Dallas either. So what the Dallas was doing was like trying to get in between the Red October and Skarsgård's sub.
Interesting.
Yeah, which I had written down, but actually all of my notes from the book got like lost.
Oh no!
Like, some kind of technical issues, so I'm just going by what I remember.
Oh yes, but during the gun battle with the cook, Sam Neill dies, and he never got to see Montana. Sad.
I don't know. He's a disposable character.
Well, in my mind, Ramius took his ashes and spread them, half of them in Montana and half of them in Arizona.
Aw, that's nice. Ramius doesn't really seem like the sentimental type, though.
I don't know. I will dispute that point, because he planned his defection for the anniversary of his wife's death. That is not something someone who's not sentimental does.
Oh, you know what? You're right. All right, I changed my opinion. I bet he totally did that in the unpublished sequel.
There we go.
Tom Clancy never got to write. Also, the fact that he wrote like the letter and like sent it is like, he's like a total drama queen. Another, sorry, I know I keep doing minor differences.
No, that's good.
I think it's interesting. So they do the classic thing, which we've seen in a lot of sci-fi movies, where the enemy shoots the torpedo and then they maneuver around to get killed by their own torpedo. Even Skarsgård's one of his seamen is like, "You fool, you've killed us." like he needs to literally explain that to the audience, or else they don't get it. So in the book, the Red October just rams Skarsgård's.
Oh shit.
And that's how they deal with it.
Oh, I like the movie better. I think, even though it's a trope, it's just such a cool way to do it.
Yeah, and one last thing that I was going to wait to mention at the end, but I'll mention now, is that the way they trick. So first of all, they trick the Soviets. So, okay, let me back up. So they come up with this plan. They're like, okay, we need to get the Soviets to believe that the Red October has been sunk. So what we're going to do is we're going to take one of our subs called the USS Ethan Allen, and we're going to scuttle it. And so that's part one. But then they also, while doing the rescue sub, they take pieces of equipment from the Red October off the Red October and then just throw it into the wreck of the Ethan Allen, so that when the Soviets come to inspect it, also on the rescue sub, they'll be like, yup, there's this unique drivetrain or whatever that's on the Red October. So, they do all that. The Soviets are like, okay, we're done. The Red October has been destroyed. Everybody go home. And everyone does go home except for this one sub that detects the Red October by pure happenstance. And then we get the whole action.
Interesting.
Again, like Speed, where it's like once you think it's over, suddenly everyone's in danger again. I guess your mileage may vary about which one you find more appealing.
Yeah.
But then, of course, now we have 2 wrecked subs. One other thing I noticed here is that Ryan walks up to Ramius and says, "I work for the CIA."
Yeah, no, he's not subtle about that. He just, but I guess it's not a time for subtlety. Well, because he wants to, well, first of all, he wants to make sure, because we've kind of didn't mention that he's in a naval officer's uniform this whole time,
right?
Even though he's not in the Navy, he was Marine but not Navy.
So he wants to make sure. A spy. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely correct. It doesn't mean you want to tell people about it, let alone people who are still technically the enemy. Also, earlier I have this written down. Ryan says, "I know this man." It's like, what?
Well, he wrote a paper about him, and which is like another thing that's of Jack Ryan trope, that he's the only person who knows anything about this person usually.
See, I don't really have so much of a problem with that, because that makes sense for why they called him in the first place.
Yeah, no, true. It's not a bad trope. It's just something that happens every time.
Well, I mean, we love those tropes for a reason. It's sort of like James Bond and his gadgets. It makes you a nice warm feeling where some things never change. The world may change, but Jack Ryan books stay the same. All right, so we have a scene with Ramius and Ryan on the sail. That's a little spy or not spy. That's a little sub information for you there. Ooh. That thing that sticks up the top of a sub is called the sail.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and the green screen is also the bad green screen makes its return. It looks terrible.
Right, I'll give you this one. This one looked terrible. Other stuff, not so much, but this one was really obvious.
And then they talk some more. I don't even know. Like, none of it really stood out to me. They just talked about like, oh, maybe someday we won't be enemies anymore. The usual.
Except not.
Well, why not?
Well, because look at the current world we live in.
Oh, womp. That's true.
Yeah. If you go to the International Spy Museum, they tell you that even like in the mid 2000s, Russian attempted penetration of the U.S. was even higher than during the Cold War.
That's too bad. I sort of thought things were okay. Well, like that's sort of like why the 90s were so happy, because they were like, Soviets are out. Everything's going to be peaceful. America's number one. Good times. This is good times for the 90s.
Yep. But yes, the movie ends with Ramius gives him a quote from Christopher Columbus, which I should have written down, but I did not. And then Ryan simply just says, "Welcome to the New World, sir."
Nice. I like that.
Yeah.
And then Ryan gets his bear.
Oh, yes. And he falls asleep on the plane.
Hey.
Not afraid of turbulence anymore.
Hey, it all comes full circle. I do like it when movies do that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is it for the Hunt for Red October. We have no spy fact and spy fiction.
We got a little bit of spy.
We do?
So what I did a little bit of research on, and by that I mean just a little bit of Googling about Caterpillar drives. So they could theoretically exist, but they wouldn't be as silent as they said in the movie. So you'd actually get a very distinct, magnetic signature from it.
Okay.
So it would be easy to detect.
What exactly is a Caterpillar drive?
So the way they explain it is, well, it's more common, more fancily known as a magnetohydrodynamic drive.
Okay.
So it basically uses it's like a jet engine for submarines is basically what it would be.
All right, so it makes it go.
So that's why you have the doors in the front and the doors on the back, and it goes through those doors. And in theory, being more quiet than having an engine running, or nuclear reactor running.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's something they talk about, is how you have to choose between being quiet and being fast. Mm-hmm. And at one point, the Dallas detects all these ships just booking it towards the U.S. because they're hunting Red October, no pun intended, or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's all I've got for spy fact and spy fiction.
Okay. Yeah, I have nothing either. I basically treated this as more or less fiction. So time for our rating, a scale of 1 to 10 martinis. Would you like to go first?
Sure. You know what? I'll give this 8 martinis because I really enjoyed it. I liked it a lot. It worked for me. I mean, I thought I think it's a shame that Alec Baldwin didn't get more Jack Ryan movies because he instead chose to do The Phantom, I think is what happened.
Oh my God, was that really him who was in that? I didn't.
It's definitely him, and that's about the right era. But I'm not sure if it's actually he turned it down or he was just unavailable and then made The Phantom.
Okay, wow, that's really something. Well, I didn't enjoy it quite as much as you did. Sorry, right. I may not have been in the right frame of mind. The movie I would give sort of more like a 5 out of 10.
All right.
And the book I would say the from the half of the book forward is like a 7 out of 10.
All right.
But the first half is more like a 2 out of 10 because it's so much description. So I'll average it out to be like 6 out of 10.
Yeah.
So I would recommend the book for people who are willing to skip large amounts of description and you want to sort of see where all the Jack Ryan stuff came from.
Or if you don't want to deal with the description, watch the movie.
Oh yeah, there you go. Or if you really like Sean Connery, it's like I feel like if you're a Sean Connery fan, you can't miss it.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
All right. So tune in next time,
where we'll be covering the Red Sea Diving Resort, the Netflix original movie, so it's easy to find.
And join us.
Till next time, I'm Zach.
And I'm Christian.
And we are the Spy-Fi Guys signing off.
Thank you for listening to the Spy-Fi Guys. If you enjoyed our podcast, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. The theme song from this podcast is Mistake the Getaway by Kevin MacLeod from Incompetech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Films, books, and television shows reviewed by our podcast are the intellectual property of their respective copyright holders, and no infringement is intended.
This is a personal podcast. Any views, statements, or opinions expressed in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the participants. They do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the participants may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated. Any views or opinions are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, or individual.
You can find our podcast on social media at The Spy-Fi Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.